Hello everyone. Had a bit of a mess up there with the
Hello,
intro
everyone.
audio. So I do apologize. Oh gosh, I've got all sorts going on here. You have to bear with me. It's been a while since I've done this. Yep. There we go. Sorry, I had loads of different things happening inside of my IDE and inside of OBS. I kind of messed that up a bit, but it's a while since I've done this. So hello everyone. If you're new to this, I am talking about C Sharp and the Null-Check operator, which is a brand new thing in C Sharp 11. I wanted to talk about it a little bit and throw my opinions into the global discussion about it. There's a lot of discussion happening on Twitter and LinkedIn and Facebook and GitHub about this operator. But first, I wanted to talk about what it is, how it works, why you may use it, and what's actually like when it's happening. It's going to, so this is going to be something that happens in C Sharp 11. For those who are using the latest and greatest that's around now, you're on C Sharp 10 and .NET 6. So in the C Sharp 11 timeframe, you'll have the null operator, which we will talk about in a moment. I just need to get on my windows correct. I got loads of different windows. Here we go. So what we're talking about is this particular thing here, parameter null checking. And I'm just going to zoom in a little bit so you can read it a little bit more. So essentially, it's the idea is we're going to be simplifying some things. I'm not a Microsoft employee. I'm not on the board of deciding what happens in C Sharp. I just wanted to talk about what it is, right? So let's talk about a canonical example of where you might use it, right? So let's do a public class foo, right? Let's say you've got a method public void bar. We take in a string message perhaps, right? Whoops. There we go. Now, if you are wanting to check whether that string is null or not, because it can be null, you would usually have to do something like message is null, and you would do a throw new argument null exception, right? Now, there's nothing wrong with that, but the problem is that took me a couple of seconds to write, and it's 4 lines of C Sharp that, you know, if I have, let's say I have a string, let's say I have a date time, date, and we have maybe public class other foo, right? And we got some properties here, prop. We're going to go string name, and we say we have a other foo instance, right? For each of these, I then have to go if date, whoops, date is null, throw new argument exception, and then if instance is null, throw. Now it's complaining because date is not nullable. But what about if I do that? Right? Now it's nullable, right? So what I'm getting at is, let's say you have 3, maybe 4, maybe 5 arguments, and you're not wrapping it in an object, or maybe you are, right? But let's come on to that in a moment. Let's say you've got 3 or 4 arguments. You need to check every single one of them before you can do something, right? Because maybe they're not allowed to be null for this process to happen. Well, that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. There's what, 4 lines per argument. So we've got 12 lines of code, which are essentially repeated. They are the same code. Now, maybe you want to go, oh gosh, name of, what did we call it? Message. Oh gosh, I can't spell honest. Message cannot be null, right? For those who don't know what that is, let me just collapse this. For those who don't know what this is an interpolated string. I could have done the same thing by going name of message plus cannot be null, right? Var message equals that. Or I could have indeed gone var builder equals new, whoops, oh gosh, string builder. I'm getting into the weeds here, right? And then go builder dot append name of message. Now this is complaining. I'll do error message. There we go. And then it's complaining because I don't have system.text. Whoops. So let's add that. I'm just showing something that we're not really. There we go. Now it's happier, right? So that's one way of doing it. This is another way of doing it. And then builder.append. I'm talking about appending strings right now, right? But let's just make sure that we're all on the same page, just in case you've never seen the dollar in front of a string pattern before. And then you would go var. Oh gosh. Var error message equals builder.build. Right, so there's three different. What's wrong with that? String builder does not contain. Oh, toString, of course. Right. There we go. So there's three different ways of building that error message, right? The error message that goes here. I just wanted to show these because these are the same way to build that string, just so that we're all on the same page. But now that we've got this, I'm going to delete all of this for now, right? So let's say you've got 3, 4, 5, 6, 19 different arguments here, or perhaps you have an options class, right? Let's say class options, and we'll go public string message. Whoops. Get set. I do like that. So if you haven't seen that before, I'll show you that in a moment. What do we call it? Date. I'm going to put a capital D. So inside of Visual Studio Code, I can type prop, and then I can hit tab, and it will start filling in other things for me, right? Other foo instance. So let's say I've swapped this bar, I've overloaded it, public void bar with options, whoops, an options instance, right? Now what I've done here is I've taken these three arguments and wrapped them inside of a class. Now the problem here is I now have to do 4 null checks. I have to do the null check to make sure that the options instance is null, right? And do that. After that I need to do options instance dot message is null. I then need to do if options instance dot date is null. I then need to do if options instance dot what else did we have? Instance, right? It's a bad name, but there you go, right? So now that we've gone to 1 argument, but we need to check all of its properties, we've now got 4 checks because there are 4 possible ways to do this. Because there's the original instance and then all of its properties. Because for some reason we're interested in whether it's null or not. Now in C#11, now this isn't going to compile. What's going to happen is my IDE is going to complain at me while I do this, right? So let's go C#11 foo. So this is the C#11 version of foo. We're going to go public void bar 11, just so we know that it's C#11. I'm going to copy these arguments in because I'm lazy. All developers are lazy, regardless of whether you're a good developer or not. I'm going to collapse these things because we don't need them just yet, right? In C#11, instead of copy pasting these checks out like this, we are going to be able to, if we want, we're going to be able to go like this, and then like this, and then like this. Now what this does in C#11, if you want it, now I'm getting compilation errors here because it's a syntax error. OmniSharp on my computer isn't targeting C#11 because C#11 doesn't exist yet. So please ignore those syntax errors. This is correct syntax for the GitHub link I've just showed you, and I'll share that on Twitter afterwards. The idea is that these two, the double bangs or the null check operator, removes the need for all of this. What it does is it's syntactical sugar. When you run this, when you build this code, what will happen is the jitter, the compiler, all those kinds of things, all the entire toolchain will throw these if checks in for you. Now it will actually throw it in like that, right? So it will throw these in such that at runtime, if you pass in a null here an exception will be raised and it will bubble up. So you don't have to write these 4 lines of code for that one property. Is this a good thing? It will completely, absolutely depend on what you want to do, right? Now, for my money, now we're in the early adoption stage. It's been ratified, it's been accepted, and a lot of people are complaining about this, and rightly so. And even if they're not complaining rightly, it's also correctly or non-correctly, it's all still valid input. A lot of people are saying, this is great, but what about if I don't want to use it? Well, the great thing about it is it's a language feature. And you don't have to use it. You can if you want, but you don't have to. Now that means that there are going to be code bases which immediately adopt this and code bases which don't. My personal opinion would be that if you are in a team that is looking at adopting this, you should have, now I've started calling these code culture meetings. And I'll explain what those are, and then I'll come back to what I was saying about this. A code culture meeting is where a group of developers, maybe people who are on a single team, get together and discuss the culture of the code that they are going to write. Now this, you can imagine it as being sort of like a coding standards meeting. What you do, and I've done this in the past and it works brilliantly, you load some code onto a big screen that everyone can see. Maybe it's a projector, maybe it's whatever, on a big screen on the wall, and you walk through it and you say, right, okay, do we want to adopt this pattern? And then you explain what the pattern is. You assume no knowledge of this pattern by anyone in the room. So you do essentially what I've just done. You write this out and you say, this is great, but maybe we don't want to do all of this manual argument checking. And then you talk about how this will do it for you. And you talk about how it's all syntactic sugar, so you can get the original back if you want to. And then you all decide as a team whether this is a good idea or a bad idea. And then let's say you have 4 or 5 different teams throughout the business. You then have a code culture meeting with one person from each team where you discuss something like this. The idea is that you're sharing this knowledge throughout the teams, throughout the business. And then eventually, over time, these new syntactical sugar, the language operators that get added as the language evolves, then get added to the way in which you all are building software. Then eventually you're all on the same page. An example was brought up. I will show it in a moment on Twitter. What about the arrow operator or the goes to operator? So this is, let's say I have a list of stuff, and it's a new list of strings perhaps, right? And that's going to complain because I don't have system generic. So let's add that using system.generic. Whoops. You know what? Let's add it auto-magically. Let's have C#. There we go. System collections generic, right? So what if I want to go list of stuff dot where x goes to x so we've got string dot is null or white space x. This is a useless collection, but I'll just call it collection for now. So the argument was made. Now this is going to complain because we don't have a link, so let's just add that. So the argument that I've seen on Twitter is about not adopting this is, well, did you ever adopt this? Or perhaps you have a one-line method. Let's say you have public void print, which just prints to the console, and you have a string message. Whoops. And you say, let's just bring that over there. And all your method is doing is a wrapper around console.writeLine. Now, why you would do this is beside the point, right? And you go message, right? What's great about this is this, because this is a single line method, you can actually say, get rid of that and get rid of that and do it as one line. So that is still exactly the same as it was before, except that before it is compiled and run, it is expanded out to that format. Now the argument was made, well, at what point do you adopt this? If you're not going to adopt this when it comes out, when do you adopt this? And the idea is, my response is when it makes sense. Let me delete this one because we don't really need that one. That was a bit of a, there we go, get rid of those. Okay, so why would you adopt this? You adopt it when it makes sense. Why would you adopt the, oh gosh, I've gotten rid of my method. Right, public void, sorry about this folks, bar string message. Let's just copy paste this because it will be easier. Oops, I've got string twice. What a never code live, folks. There we go. So why would you adopt this? Well, you adopt it when everyone is ready for it. You adopt it when you think that the team is ready for it. This is why a code culture meeting is so important. You get everyone around a table, either virtually because of the world we live in at the moment, or in person when everyone's allowed back into offices and such. You get everyone around a meeting. You either have it on Slack, you have it on Teams, you have it in person, whatever. You show some code like this and you explain what it does and you say, right, let's have a vote. Everyone's vote counts. Let's have a vote as to whether we need to do this or not. It's the same with if you wanted to do guard clauses. Now, for those who haven't seen guard clauses, here's a really quick example of it. So we're going to go public static class string guard clause. Now this is a standard example of a guard clause that I may write. We're going to go public static, we're going to go void cannot be null or empty, or white space perhaps. I don't like white space as a word because, well, my screen is in dark mode, right? So that should be maybe a different color. Or empty. Empty is not really the correct name, but let's just use that for now, right? We say this string message, and we may need to pass in the name of string. There we go. So what we do here is we're literally taking the if null or white space check and wrapping around that and throwing an error, right? So string that is null or white space message, and then we'll say throw new argument null. Yeah, we'll say argument null for now, and we'll say name of string cannot be null or white space. Again, I don't like that. Otherwise, you don't do anything, right? And the reason that you might do this, let me just collapse all of these things so you don't see, right? So let's say var, let's say we have a string that is my string, some really cool string, and you would go my string dot cannot be null or white space, and you pass in name of my string. And what's great about this is, again, this isn't to do with the null check operator, but you may show this, right? You could show this and say, look, we're looking at doing guard clauses. This is a guard clause. This is what it may look like. Perhaps you would have a custom exception that you would raise. I don't know. And this is how you would use it. And then you have that discussion around the team. Do we want to do this or do we not want to do this? Would we rather do... So there's two ways to do this, right? This is with guard clause, and there is another way of doing it without. Let's just scroll down a bit. Guard clause. Because all you're doing with that guard clause is you're saying if it's that, otherwise we do my name of my string, and that needs to be a capital S. So all you are doing when you show this off is you say we could do it in one line like this, or we could do it like this, and you talk about the positives and the negatives. First off, the negative for this is I need to know what this magic, there's some magic going on here, right? So I could ensures that a given string, and you might want to say param ref message. You don't have to do this, by the way. This is just cannot be either null or white space characters. And you might do is it raises? No, I can't remember the actual param, but you would do that, right? And then when you hover over it, Oh, okay, maybe not. You would then get this documentation shown here as you hover over it. Now it's not going to do it because I can't compile it, so we'll ignore that for now. So you would say, right, we can do it this way, but then we need to provide some documentation about what this means. Cannot be null or white space, and what that does. And then you would have to maybe try. You'd have to remember to wrap it in a try, perhaps, and then a catch. Argument null exception A N E. I like to give my exceptions short names based on their type. So you would have to say, look, you've got to wrap it in a try catch like you would normally, and this will raise that exception, which will bubble up in case it, you know, if you don't catch it. Or you could do it yourself manually like this. Negatives. I don't know precisely what this does at runtime, at compile time, at build time, at like write time, as I'm typing, at type time. I don't know what this is doing when I'm typing it unless I can actually see into it, right? Positives, I'm not repeating myself. If I have 15 properties I need to check, I'm not repeating myself with lots of if checks. Another positive, I can test this, and regardless of how I use it, my tests will prove whether it is correct or not, right? Or whether it is doing what we think it should be doing or not. Just take a sip. So that's why you might do a code culture meeting. That's what I call them, a CCM, a code culture meeting. Let's just close this and close this because that's not what we're talking about here. C#11. So what I would say to you is the double bang operator, the null check operator, is entirely conditional on how you and the team around you write C#. With C#11, we're going to have this operator available to us in our tool belt. Now the difference is, do you use it? Don't you use it? There's a whole world of answers there. My opinion is you sit down with the other developers on your team, if you are lucky enough to have a team, and you say, and you have that open discussion. Do we have this operator? And maybe during the first few months, you might decide, well, because it is so new, perhaps we need to have this operator present, such that, or rather, sorry, let me try that again. Perhaps whilst it is so new during that early adoption phase, when C#11 becomes available for people to use, and then it becomes the actual version du jour, C#11, do we have this operator and do we need to document it? Maybe new developers coming onto the project don't know what the double bang does. Do we need to have that in our documentation, maybe in our wiki, maybe as part of our onboarding? Or do I, as Jamie the employee, hold a meeting where I discuss with the dev team, hey, okay, so it has been decided, maybe by our CTO, maybe by our code culture meeting, we are going to be using the double bang, or maybe we're not going to be using the double bang. It might be useful for you to know what it is, so I will give this as a presentation to the team. Let's talk about the double bang, and then maybe we can have another discussion as to whether we should use it or not. And I think that's the important thing. Communication is more important about, with this, because it's really important that you communicate with your team and the other people that you work with as to whether you should use something or not. Now, as far as I'm aware, you remember that we did this example here where we took these individual arguments and wrapped them inside of another class. So if I scroll back up, we have this options class here, and we have the three properties. Now, as far as I'm aware, the double bang operator doesn't traverse down the tree. So if you did public void, and this is the overridden bar, so this has just got an options with an options with a lowercase options instance. And if you did the double bang there, it won't do the checks that we were doing before. So if we scroll down and we ignore this one, so we did that double bang will do, so this double bang here will do this check here. It will not do these checks here. Whoops, these checks here. And so if you need to check those properties, perhaps you should have a method on the options which does maybe public void prop check, right? Which then goes, if, you know, does those if message is null, throw new null exception, null reference exception, or similar. Sorry, I thought I was going to sneeze there. So perhaps the future is, if you are going to use this double bang on a class which contains those properties, perhaps you'll need to do this. I don't know yet, and that's just conjecture on my part. But what we need to do is we need to have the open, frank discussion with our teams of, do we adopt this? Not why do we adopt this, not when do we adopt this, is whether we actually do. Do we adopt this? And is there enough information within the team to understand what the double bang means? And it's exactly the same with that the goes to operator, this arrow operator that I'm talking about here. You don't have to use it, but it's there if you want to. Now, if you're inside of, maybe you have ReSharper, or maybe you're using Visual Studio with, maybe you're using Visual Studio with ReSharper, or maybe using JetBrains Rider, it will make these suggestions for you. Hey, your method has one line in it. We can make it into an arrow operator syntax. And it may be easier for you to understand. It may be more difficult for you to understand. But the important thing is that you have that frank discussion either with yourself or with your team, and you decide, is it a good idea? It becomes more difficult when you're working in open source, because if your entire code base is on GitHub, GitLab, etc., and someone comes along and says, oh, cool, I would like to make a pull request for this. And then they put in the pull request, except they hit a bunch of lines with these double bangs. They don't know what it means. What do they do then? Is it fair to accept or to expect all C# developers to know what the double bang means? Is it fair to expect that all C# developers know what the arrow syntax means? In that case, it might be useful for you as a team of open source developers, or you as a solo open source developer, to perhaps have a coding standards document that says, yes, we're going to go with these particular standards. Also, as this section at the bottom, some of these operators aren't in wide use yet, and so we'll have maybe a single paragraph about the double bang operator, which could be just, we use the NullCheck double bang operator because it makes it easier for authors of code to get up and running really fast. Or indeed, you could have, we don't use the double bang operator because it looks a little confusing to newer developers. And you could then put in there something along the lines of, any pull requests which use the double bang operator will immediately be passed over to someone who will then point you in the direction of our coding standards and tell you that maybe we shouldn't do this because it doesn't make sense for our workflow. And so that way you're making it very obvious to anyone who wants to come along and contribute, or indeed people who just want to sit and read the code, what this operator does, this double bang operator. Excuse me one moment, my nose is a bit runny today, so if you bear with me 1 second, I'm just going to mute. I'm sorry about that, everyone. So you then have that discussion in maybe a wiki or maybe in the README about whether you should use this operator or not. The thing with C# is it is an evolving language. Everything is changing on, well, now a yearly basis, or rather it has the ability to change on a yearly basis, because .NET is now no longer tightly coupled to the Windows operating system. These sorts of innovations can be pushed out on a very more frequent basis, perhaps a little more frequent than most .NET devs are used to, especially if you've only worked with .NET Framework with a capital F. Modern .NET, .NET Core, .NET 5, .NET 6, next year .NET 7, .NET 8, and add all the numbers on the end, right? Modern .NET has this ability to innovate fast. Sometimes that will scare folks, and that is totally understandable. Sometimes that will excite folks, and that again is totally understandable. And then for everyone else, they'll probably sit there and go, I'm not excited, I'm not scared, it's fine, right? But what we're going to be seeing soon is these innovations happening, But the great thing about this is you don't have to use it. It's a tool in your toolbox if you want to use it. You don't have to. You can if you want, but it doesn't matter if you do, and it doesn't really matter if you don't. Have that frank discussion with you and your team about whether you should use it, and then go ahead and use it, or go ahead and not use it. Like I said, it's similar to this arrow operator, and it's similar to how I have, let me collapse these, it's similar to how I have talked about how you can do things with guard clauses. You know, you don't have to use it, but if you want to, it's there to use. Now you could probably, where are we, string guard clause, you could probably make this a little bit more explicit and say T, where T is string, right? And then you can get rid of string guard clause there, right? What's this? It doesn't like it. Maybe I could do it like that, but whatever, right? You can make this a generic method, and then it makes it, in my opinion, a little more complex to people who are new to development. But again, that's by the by, right? You have to remember that you are not writing code for the compiler, right? And this is a key thing, right? You're not writing code for the compiler. You may think at the beginning of your career that you are writing code for the compiler. Actually, you're not. You're writing code for other developers to read, because, and I don't wish to offend anyone when I say this, the compiler is way smarter than you are. It's way smarter than I am. It's way smarter than something like 75% of developers out there, because there are people who are very, 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 very smart, whose job it is to make the compiler very, 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 very smart. And so the compiler will do things that you don't realize it's doing, like optimizing your code on that first pass during the compilation. And then it further does optimizations when it's running at runtime during the JIT process, the just-in-time compilation process. And so the compiler is way smarter than likely than I know the compiler is way smarter than I'll ever be, and I'm not a very smart person, right? And so, or at least I don't think I am. And so I know that the compiler will be way smarter than most developers, just because there is that much engineering effort gone into the compiler to make it that smart. And so the thing you need to remember is you're not writing code for the compiler, you're writing code for other people to read. And other people to read also includes yourself. As soon as you hit save and that knowledge is gone, you are another person, right? You can be a different developer, another developer, whilst you are writing the code. You could be a different developer 6 months later, the next day, a year's time, 10 years time, 15 years time. And so it is your job to write code in such a way that someone with just a passing knowledge of the language can understand it. Now, maybe the double bang operator is maybe a bit esoteric, and you wouldn't expect all .NET developers to know what it is. Maybe in 5 years' time, we can expect all .NET developers to have an understanding of what it might do, right? Rather than what it does do. And so over time, we will get to a point where more .NET developers know what the double bang operator is, but immediately not everyone will. And so it's up to you, like I said earlier on, to have that code culture meeting and decide as a team right now, or rather as a team when C# 11 gets released, are we going to adopt this and are we not? Because it's important for everyone on the team to have that sort of that knowledge of which things can I use and which things can't I use, because otherwise you'll get a hodgepodge of code that is not consistent. You'll have things where you'll have maybe one method which uses this arrow syntax and 12 others which don't. And what's better is consistency over correctness. Now, this is something that Matthew Jarrett brought up on the podcast. For people who don't know, I'm the host of the .NET Core podcast. There's a thing that Matthew Jarrett brought up, and that was consistency over correctness. It is better to be consistent with the way that you write code rather than immediately 110% correct, because anyone reading through the code will know, oh, right, we always do single line methods with the arrow syntax. Always. We always do the double bang, or maybe we never do the double bang. Or maybe we never use nullable types. It's more important to be like that, be that consistent, to have that consistency than it is to be 100% correct with your code, because incorrectness can be picked up at PR time, and usually if you've gotten something incorrect, you can go, oh, yep, no, I get that, yep, there's a bug here, absolutely, I'll fix that. But if a PR comes back with, you've used the double bang and we don't use the double bang here, you may feel like animosity. You may feel a little attacked. Well, I want to use the double bang. Why can't we use the double bang? And you immediately react to that with like anger and upset. Let's not do that, folks. Let's have this consistent feeling and have everyone on the same page, because otherwise we're never going to get where we're going, right? We'll never ship great software, and you all write great software. So let's go out there and have a frank, honest discussion with our teams as to whether we should use this operator when it comes out. And that is just a case of, you just need to spend a little time looking through the proposals for C# and whether they are being accepted or not. Now there is actually an open, well, I believe it's a closed issue now because it's been ratified and accepted. But take a look through the parameter null checking in the C# Lang proposals GitHub for what it should be. Now, like I said here, right, the bang bang double bang operator, it looks like this with a bang bang, and it will be translated into this at runtime. So it even does the name off, right? So what we're saying is that's 2 key presses. Technically it's 3 because you have to hold shift to be able to get the exclamation mark from your 1 character on a QWERTY keyboard. 1 versus how many characters and key presses there? Or rather 3 versus what? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then, you know, we carry on from there, right? But it is definitely worth reading through things like these, the proposals, especially the ones that get accepted. It is definitely worth reading through it. And if you want a less apprehensive, I guess, a more concise discussion on my feelings for the C# NullCheck or double bang, check Twitter, the .NET Core Show Twitter. I have a thread that I posted today on the 13th of February about what I feel about it and whether we should use it or not. And I genuinely feel like it depends. It depends on what your team's goals are, and that you should have a code culture meeting to decide whether you should do this or not. Anyway, that's all I'm going to say about that. I'm going to wrap up now, and I'm going to say, when it comes to new operators that are added to our language, our C# language, a language that is constantly evolving, I would say that you should have a discussion within your team about whether you should use it or not. You can react how you want to react. You want to react with great excitement, with fear, with anger, whatever. All of those reactions are valid, but I feel like you should have a discussion with your team as to whether you should do it or not. Right? And then once everyone's on the same page, then you can go forward from there. I personally, I'm looking forward to trying this out when I can get a C# 11 build on my computer. I may decide not to use it. I may decide to use it. But those are my thoughts right now. Let me know what your thoughts are. If you're watching this later on demand, I can see, you know, no one's in the chat right now because I kind of just did this without announcing it. But if you are on YouTube and you're watching this and you've sat through it all so far and you're wondering, should I do this? Have a discussion. Start a discussion in the comments. Let me know whether you think you would do this or not, because I'm very interested in whether this should be a thing that, or rather, I'm very interested in the positives and the negatives, why people would choose to do this or not. But anyway, with that being said, be sure to check out the podcast. Be sure to check out Twitter. Let me throw up some links for you. Let me put those on the screen. I will put them over on a minute. So please do make sure to check out the .NET Core Show Twitter. That's the podcast that I make. I'm just going to close this window and make sure that we're still being broadcasting. So at .NET Core Show, that's where you can get in touch with the podcast itself. There's .NET Core.show, which is the podcast, so you can click on any of these links and there will be an embedded player with that in there, or you can hit this cloud with a down button on it and it will download it to your computer. There is also a if you hit the where are we? The subscribe button. There's lots of different places to actually subscribe to the show, and some of those allow you to leave reviews should you wish to do so, or you can listen to it all on the website. It is completely up to you. If you want to get in touch with me, I will just do that over here. I am at Podcaster J. As you can see from this here, I recently received a Microsoft MVP, which I'm super proud of. So that's one of the things that I do. I am also one of the hosts of the Waffling Tailors, which is a video game podcast. So if you're interested in video games, do check that out. But with all that being said, I'm going to say to you all, have a wonderful rest of your day, and I hope that you're all wonderful and taking care of each other, because you are all worth it. Thank you ever so much.